this episode of Left Off the Map, we're heading to the northwest coast of Tasmania, to Smithton and Stanley. And my guest is going to be Amy Cure, an Olympian who grew up in this area. We're going to do a couple of things, but I'm going to introduce Amy to oysters. She's not a very big oysters fan, but I reckon I can convert her with both fresh oysters and cooked oysters. So to keep on that oyster theme, I'm going to show you two great dressings that you can pair with your oysters next time you get them to lift the flavour a little bit. Firstly, I'm going to do a soy and black vinegar oyster. I need not too much shallot, but I need it to be really, really thinly diced. So a brunoise, so you're looking at probably 1 millimetre to 2 millimetres per dice. You see the fan I've created, the lines I've created through there. Once you've got them, you're going to run your knife twice through the shallot. Once about 1/3 up, and then the next one about 2/3 up. And then down through your shallot, squaring up those battens to get your brunoise. So about 1 millimetre to 2 millimetres by 1 millimetre to 2 millimetres. You don't need a lot, that's it. We're going to mix both dressings in the bowl. I'm going to take about half of my shallot and pop in there. I'm going to use my other half for the other dish. Then in with that, I want a little bit of soy, about a teaspoon, a little bit of black vinegar, teaspoon, and a tiny amount of sesame oil. Now sesame oil is really strong, so you don't need much. You need like 2-3 drops and that's it. I'm going to put some black sesame seeds in. And then I'm going to taste and see whether it shouldn't need any salt because it's got that soy sauce in there. But I do want to taste it just to see if it needs a little sprinkle of salt because our oysters are going to be quite salty anyway. Ooh, yum. It does not need any salt. There's enough salt from that. The prominent flavour that you get is that black vinegar, which is awesome. Right, so this is making a small amount. We're only doing 3 and 3. So an entree size of these oysters 2 ways. So I'm going to spoon a small amount onto 3 of these. And I was going to clean this bowl out, but I'm not going to, because that flavour is actually going to go quite well with this dish. So the rest of my shallot, pop that in. Some tomato paste. So this is, I'm going for a Bloody Mary flavour. So vinegar and soy in a Bloody Mary is really, really nice. Small amount of tomato paste. Small amount of horseradish. Mix those in. Small amount of sherry vinegar. I've already got some black vinegar in there, so we only need a small amount of that. Need vodka in a Bloody Mary, so a small amount of vodka. Then some sumac, which is a sour berry that's been dried and then blitzed. So a little bit of sumac, pinch of sumac. Celery salt I'm going to put on top, so I'll leave that for the top for that celery flavour. You could dice some celery and put some diced celery in there if you wanted to. Some chives. Don't need a lot, maybe a tablespoon. Put that in. And then I need some fresh tomato, which again, I'm going to dice really fine, like the shallot. So top and tail. Turn it on the side, put your knife in and make an incision. And then keeping between the skin and the flesh, you want to just roll the tomato out as you cut. Same sort of feeling that you get from filleting a fish, staying just on the skin. I'm gonna try and make this as thin as possible. And again, cut that into really thin battens. And then go the other way for your dice. And you'll have your tablespoon of finely diced tomato. And it goes a long way. Because you don't need a lot of dressing on top of each oyster, it's gonna go a long way. All right, so put our diced tomato in. Mix that in. I'm not going to check this one for salt because I am going to season this with some celery salt. So my other 3 oysters, spoonful of my Bloody Mary dressing. And then a little pinch of celery salt. Give it that celery flavour. Because we don't have any diced celery in there. If you wanted to, you could find some nice chive sprigs. Finish with them on each one. There's no reason why you couldn't put chives on the Asian ones as well. Now, if you're someone who doesn't like oysters, normally it's due to the texture of the oyster, not the flavour. The flavour is beautiful. Fresh oysters have an absolutely gorgeous flavour. So when we catch up with Amy, we're going to have some fresh oysters, and I'm going to show you how you can cook them as well. So do a tempura oyster to get over that texture thing if you need to. So now we're going to head off, me and Amy, making our way through Smithton and Stanley and finding out a little bit about fresh and cooked oysters. We're heading to Smithton. There's a growing reputation for oysters coming out of a place called Tarkine Fresh Oysters. So we're going to check them out. What's your experience with oysters been like?
Yeah, look, when I was younger, I tried some oysters at the local pub.
Yeah.
And they were just very plain. And I had a friend that liked oysters and a friend of my parents, and they asked if I'd tried one, and I said no, and they said you have to try one. So I tried one, and I really didn't like it at all. Like, I went to the bathroom and just spat it out. It's not good.
These will be different. Fresh oysters, good oysters. So many people have a bad recollection. It's exactly that. It's a pub oyster.
Yeah.
They're not like that when they're fresh.
Yeah.
These guys have a great reputation now. We can turn you around on oysters. Tarkine Fresh Oysters was started by John Polk 40 years ago with only one employee. The company is now run by his daughter, Cassie Plaza, and employs over 20 full-time staff. We're checking out the recently opened cafe where we can sample the seafood directly from the water in Morgan's Bay. So it is a pretty impressive setup that you've got here now. How long did it take you to get from when you first had the idea to being able to produce what you can produce now?
Oh, well, my father started this over 40 years ago.
Right, so it's generational.
It sure is. Yeah, we're into second generation, bringing up the third generation into the oystering industry now.
And 40 years ago, what did your father see that he thought, right, I'm going to start producing oysters in Smithton?
Well, he actually was a Boilermaker welder by trade, had never given it a thought. He needed something to provide for his family and thought this was a great thing to go into. We had some of the best water here in Tasmania.
That's ground zero for good oysters, isn't it? It's good water.
Oh,
They're
yes.
a filter feeder.
Yeah, they're a filter feeder, so, you know, the really good air quality, the good water quality in Tassie makes for a good oyster.
And everyone's always heard about the oysters that come from the east coast of Tasmania.
Yes.
Why don't we hear as much good things about the northwest coast and oysters?
We have a lot of rainfall here, so most of the time we're only open for our mature sales from the start of December through till around after Easter, so around the May, and then we get too much rainfall. So we've just gone into some tanking, which is a worldwide practice.
So it's being able to supply all year round is where the issue. All year round, basically.
Not being able to guarantee the product all year round on this basis, but now that we've got the cafe up and running, that's what we're aiming to do. So you will hear a lot more about us. We will be starting to put our name out there a little bit
And those
more.
tanks are there to be able to supply that now?
Yes.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
All right, let's go in and try some.
Okay.
So now you've had what I consider to be some of the best oysters I've ever eaten. What do you think?
Yeah, they really were. I was not expecting it. They were really nice. They didn't taste like I was in
that
6 foot
memory.
under the ocean. No, they were really good, and I was quite surprised actually by I think it was the strawberry and tomato salsa one.
I didn't think that was going to work for that.
No, but it was really, it was very nice. I really enjoyed that one.
Tonight we're putting our feet up at Horizon Deluxe Apartments. These luxurious rooms give you a premier view of Stanley and the Nut, and will be a perfect spot to cook up our oysters that we picked up earlier.
We're going to rise above this.
So I had this idea in my head that not everyone likes oysters because of the texture. So what I was going to cook you was the tempura oysters and do a beer batter to create the tempura. But as we found out today, you're okay with the whole texture of raw oysters. So this kind of doesn't have the same impact that I thought it was going to have. But if you're someone who doesn't like the texture of raw oysters, but you enjoy the flavour, the best way to get around it is cooking them. And I think cooking oysters, you've got to cook them quickly. So a tempura needs to be cold. You can use whatever liquid you want to flavour it. So put some ice in there and get it as cold as you possibly can, make it as thin as you possibly can, and a really slight dusting of flour on the oyster so that the batter has something to stick to. And then just flash fry them for about 45 seconds, and this is what you end up with. As soon as you're now converted into the fresh oysters, we don't necessarily have to try them, but you get to spend the night in front of the Nut, and it is a beautiful outlook. And as I said, relax, chill out. You said before that you don't get a lot of time to relax when you get home because you see so many people.
Yeah.
This is a good chance for you to do that. Good luck in Tokyo.
Thank you.
The state is unbelievably proud of you and what you've done up to this point. Good luck.
Thank you.
We're going to rise above this.
It's always cool when you can hang out with a local Olympian. There are not many of them, and not many people can say they've been to the Olympics. So fantastic effort by Amy to do as much as she's done, starting from just riding as a hobby. She's done a great job. So that was a cooked oyster dish. Now we're going to look at another kind of a cooked oyster dish. We're going to cook a beurre blanc to go with our oysters. Beurre blanc and oysters is a great combination. It's a combination that's been around forever. And when recipes are tried and tested over time, you know they're good. So beurre blanc, it's a famous sauce that's pretty simple to make. A lot of people will tell you it's difficult. It really isn't. You need a couple of shallots, which you need to dice reasonably thinly. You could just use, a roughly chopped shallot and then strain your wine reduction, and you would end up with pretty much the same thing. But I want to use the texture in the sauce, so I'm going to dice mine finely. So, dicing, same as we did in the recipe earlier. It's actually the same shallot from the recipe earlier. Just want to go through, run those little batten patterns through your shallot, and then cut the other way, and you'll get your dice. Got a full shallot here. Do the same thing. So your little cuts going that way through your shallot again, like we did before, and then back the other way. And obviously, it always helps to have a super sharp knife. Okay, so shallots are going to go into a pan. Like so. This is sort of similar to how you make a hollandaise as well. So we're going to make a wine and shallot reduction, except I'm going to use champagne. Sparkling wine, about a cup. Sparkling wine in with our shallot. And I'm going to reduce that down by about 3/4. That's going to intensify our flavour. It's going to give us our acidity that we definitely need for this dish, because we're going to whisk in some cold butter. I'm going to add a little bit of cream to it. So we need acidity to be able to cut through that. And I've even got, if I get down to that sort of 50 mils of my reduction and I don't think it's acidic enough, I've got some white wine vinegar, some Chardonnay vinegar that I can add to it if need be. So while that reduces down, I want some freshness in it as well. So I'm going to take some spring onion tops and some chives. I'm going to cut them finely, and they'll go in just at the last minute to give our really rich, intense, thick sauce a little bit of freshness. It's probably about enough. All right, a little pinch of salt. So that could take, for that to reduce down, that could take 8 to 15 minutes, depending on how wide your pan is, depending on how hot your flame underneath is or your hob is. So we'll come back and look at that in 5 minutes and see how we're going. So you can see how much that's reduced down. So we're down to probably 75 mils, which is where we want to be. So now we're going to add our butter. So I've got cubes of butter that have been in the fridge. I'm just going to add a few at a time and then stir those in. I just want to emulsify this butter into our sauce. Another few knobs. We're going to add in as much butter as we think it can take. Basically until you've got a creamy sauce. We're going to cheat a little bit, and then I'm going to add a little bit of cream. Like I said before, you can strain off all of your shallots and just be left with that liquid. So that really intense, really acidic wine reduction. Right, happy with that. I'm just going to add a little bit of cream. Not much, about a tablespoon. Right, so now is where I want to taste and see if my seasoning's right. So do I need to add any salt? It's nice and tart, which is how it's meant to be. Probably needs a little bit more cream and some salt. And just a touch more cream. And now our fresh herbs. We can turn the heat off completely. So we've got our chives and our spring onion. Pop that in, heat's off. It's going to freshen it up a little bit. Okay, that is our beurre blanc sauce. So just before you're ready to eat these oysters is when you would pour this on top. A bit of the beurre blanc over the top. oysters, beurre blanc, spring onion and chives. Another way I think of creating, because the heat, a little bit of heat that's in the sauce that you've made, it's gonna firm the oysters up a little bit so you can get past that whole texture issue that a lot of people have with oysters. And the flavour of a beurre blanc sauce is so moorish, so yummy, so acidic, so creamy, all the things that you want in a good sauce to go with seafood. You're not really gonna notice the texture too much anyway. So give it a try, or just have some beurre blanc on some fish. Just grill some fish and make this sauce and put it on top. You'll absolutely love it. Some steamed vegetables or whatever you want to put it on.